Tonight, we're going to spend a few minutes on our capital improvement program. You will hear us abbreviate that CIP. Patty is going to operate the overhead for us so you can see. Anthony's going to describe for you different projects. The value I hope to add is to describe to you the order in which we have listed the projects. So, Patty, thank you, that's very helpful. So these projects are not listed in random order, but it might not necessarily be obvious what order they are listed in. And so from the first column, funded prior years, from that point on the left toward the right, they're listed in descending dollar value order. Some people might say, Jackie, why have you listed prior funded projects? Theoretically, then, these projects are listed in the order of staff time devoted to it. So we don't have any new dollars associated with Town Hall is the first project listed. It's the first project listed. We just issued the debt less than 30 days ago. It's the first project listed because it's the highest dollar value, thereby it's one of the projects that over the course of the next 18, 24 months will consume a fair amount of staff time managing that project. And so it's listed in descending dollar value order. I would call your attention to the second project then, Gilead Road West. Those first two projects, Town Hall and Gilead Road West, are listed at the top of this spreadsheet, and the reason they are is, so Gilead Road West is the second dollar value. Notice Gilead Road West is an example of there are no dollars associated with Gilead Road West in FY25's budget, but there is a significant amount of dollars that we'll need to come up with a funding source for in FY26. And so we didn't list a project in multiple rows. So once it gets listed first in prior funded projects, it will show up in whatever additional year it needs more funding, which may or may not be FY25. Anthony, we hope to get through this list of more than 60 projects with you tonight by concentrating on the projects that you see funded in 25 and 26. And so I will implore you, if there's a project listed in FY25 and you are passionate, Jackie, it's pointless for us to spend staff time and dollars in the FY25 budget. The manager's recommended budget for FY25, which is the only year that you're technically funding, will come to you at our next meeting. And so if there is a majority of the board who sees a project listed in FY25 that you see no point in us funding, some head nods tonight would help us know better what we need to bring to you at our next meeting. So please do pay particular attention to the FY25 projects. That's all I've got related to setup. Anthony, if you'd like to go through the list of projects now, I would welcome it.
Well, Mayor and Board, what I would say is, and Jackie hit on this, but at the budget retreat, you should have seen pretty much all of these projects. There may be a couple that have been added since, and then the dollar amount, some of them may have changed a little bit. I'll just mention two particular projects because we discussed those at the retreat, and I just want to be very clear on those two. David Kinney Farm Road, the funding for that is we had some funding, we got it to a design phase. You will see the future funding on that is out in a future year. And the reason for that, we talked about, we want to wait, make sure 73 moves forward, and we'll come back and address that at a later date. Same thing with Church Street from Dalewood to Holbrook, exact same thing. You should see future funding out in a future year because we're getting ready to do a small area plan. And once we get feedback from that, then this board or future board will address how we potentially move that project forward or not. So I wanted to bring specific attention to those two projects because that was the feedback I got from the board at the retreat, and I just want to be very clear on those two projects. Otherwise, as Jackie said, in the funded prior years, a lot of these projects are in various stages. So in that column, I was not going to go down and read every one of those. Some of these projects, like as Jackie said, Gilead Road West, you're going to see on here for several more years. Town Hall, hopefully you'll only see on here for 2 more years at max. And then some of these projects will finish up at the end of this year, calendar year. Some will finish up throughout the year and next year. So I don't want to go down and spend time on every one of these projects and read. You should have received a in-depth description page for each one of these. Obviously, all of that's available to the public to review. A lot of these projects are probably like, gosh, we've heard about this project for the last 5 years. And because you got to remember, some of these projects, you have to go through design, engineering, right-of-way, utilities, construction, et cetera. So some of these projects could be on here for 10 years.
Anthony, can I add that very first column where it says page number, that's what page number it will tie to in the detailed CIP, Capital Improvement Program. And what I'd like for you to know about that FY25 column, please don't interpret that means we're going to use general fund balance to fund those projects. These detailed spreadsheets will tell you what the source of funding is, like the one that Patty has pulled up here, Town Hall. LOBS financing was a substantial portion of how we're funding that project. And so don't necessarily think that it's coming out of the general fund just because it's listed in the 25 column, because we do contemplate that in FY25, in about October of this year, we would use some of that bond authority that voters gave us this past November, issue more bonds that will fund part of the projects, quite frankly, not just in 25, but between 25 and 27.
So as Jackie said, I will probably spend most of my time on FY25, because that's what's going to be in the budget. And if you see, it's already has, just for example, sidewalks. Obviously, we're going to have money for sidewalks every year, so I'm not going to spend any time on that. And there's just not one sidewalk, there are many sidewalks. So you'll continue to see that every year. If you go on down a little bit further towards, of course, I'm trying to look at it too, and I'm going to slide over here closer to Commissioner, so try not to bite her. Gibson Park Drive Phase 2, we've talked about that project. So additional funding is needed for that in 25 to continue to finish that project out. Same thing, Farrelltown Parkway. And like I said, I'll stop, and we even have backup maps. You remember we showed you all the different sort of maps of where these are at the budget retreat. We have those if you need to see where that is, or if you're not sure where that is. But Farrelltown Parkway will continue to work on that project. We've already spent funding on all of these projects, and this is just carrying it through. Some of these projects you'll see in the description sheets, it says we're going to probably use bond dollars, et cetera. We may use transportation reserve. There may be CRTPO funding associated with those projects. But that detail is in the sheets that are attached. Same thing with Arahova Drive. That project is over by James Funeral Home and Credit Union in that area, that we're doing some improvements to that roundabout and continue to finish out that project. Commerce Center Drive, you can see we have funding with that, but then the next phase of that is in FY26. You go on down, I'm actually McCoy-Hambright. We're doing design work at McCoy-Hambright. So after design work, you got to get in the right-of-way and construction. That's why you see those in out years in 25 and in 26 is construction. As you get on down to McCoy and McElwain, the exact same thing. We're in design. But in 25, we'll get into right-of-way and then construction in 26. Reese Boulevard and Van Story Drive, we have funding associated with that. We've started design, and we hope to get into construction in 25 and finish that project. And now we've got a couple that kind of you don't see previous funds related to, so these may be brand-new projects that we're working on, or maybe CRTPO funds associated with it. So Walters, Huntersville, Concord, 3rd, I think we maybe received an email over the weekend on that one. That project, as probably was stated in the email, I think Ms. Jones had sent us an email. Obviously, there's a lot of development going on in that area with Bowman's project over there, and thus we're starting the first phase of it. We have to start design, we got to do engineering, and then right-of-way construction. So you see so we'll start that, and as we go through those phases, we're looking at the funding, the future funding in FY28 to actually construction. It's not going to happen overnight, so it takes some time. 28 may move up, early on, but right now that's kind of how we slate it, but we've got to start the project. So what we're saying in 25 is start that project. NC 115 from McCord to 73 is basically taking McCord Road at the roundabout and taking it over and attached to 73 by the storage units. That's what that project is. Actually, I'm sorry, take that back. That's a different one. I jumped ahead of myself. That's actually taking it at 115 at McCord Road to 73. We have a project down by the roundabout that takes us to the storage unit. This one actually has CRTPO funds associated with this project, so we'll begin the design phase of that in FY '25. Ranson Road sidewalk, that's basically looking to put sidewalk and fill in the gaps on Ranson Road. Mayor and I were talking about this earlier. I'm trying to remember how far you could walk, but basically, you could definitely start at Outback or somewhere around there and come on around by the elementary school and come on up by the Catholic Church, and if we put the sidewalk in, walk down to Torrance Creek Elementary and come on out to Gilead Road and walk on over to Town Hall if you like. So I don't know if I'm gonna walk that far, but that's a good little section. So this is a strong connection that ties schools together, parks together, et cetera. That's what this project is all about. And then as you move on down to we all know what the 73 Greenway Bridge is. Right now, DOT is telling us, you remember we got CRT PO funding for that. We're working with the county on partnering on that project. But DOT at this point in time is telling us that with that agreement, we would need to fund our portion of that at the beginning, but we're still working through those details, but that's where it's slated right now to be an FY '25 budget. Waymer Park Splash Pad, I probably don't need to say anything about that one. We know what that is. 21 in Gilead Mast Arms, so they're working on 21 in Gilead right now. And so out there we'll have what I'll call the black mast arm poles out there instead of a bunch of strung wire on metal poles. That's our portion of that project.
So I'm sorry, just real quick. So was that an upgrade from what they were going to put in? Is that why we're calling it mast arms? Usually we get
Yes, sir.
involved in sidewalks and stuff like that.
Yep, so any upgrades, so what you would normally get is the, on a project like that, you would get like a metal pole.
Yep.
Typically silver in color, and you have a bunch of wires hanging across the road with lights. We don't do that anymore. We put up black mast arm poles in all locations now. So all throughout town, that's what we'll do on any project, like Ranson Road.
Yeah, like
Just
Gilead
that project we
Road.
just
out-
finished,
yeah.
mast arm poles.
Yeah,
So
out
that's
Gilead
kind of an
Road.
example.
Gotcha.
If you want to see more of the old stuff, go to 73 intersection at where 73 and Target intersection, 73 and 21. That's where you see the strung poles, right, Stephen? He's nodding his head that I'm right for once. All right, I got to follow small over here. Let's see, what did I leave off? US 21, so US 21 Greenway Tunnel, we all know what that project is. That's taking the Greenway under 21. We received CRTPO funds for that. That's our match for that project. And soon as they're finished, with same thing here as with the 73 bridge crossing, we're working through agreements with DOT. Right now, what they're telling us, we want that funding allocated on the front end versus the back end. That could change, but we want to make sure that we are prepared for that. The Holbrook Street connection to Dallas Street, if you recall, we connected in behind Aldi. You know how that road connects into the back of Aldi? So from Aldi at that connection, it has to swing out where the house was torn down and tie into Dallas Street. If you're coming up 21, you see where that kind of little bump out is, and that hook will connect up to behind Aldi. And so that's what this section of road is, all tied into 21. Let's see, the North Meck Park lower playground replacement. So all of our park equipment that we're replacing now, you're going to see the poured-in rubber surface. You're not going to see mulch and things like that. You know, they're not handicap accessible. So anything we put in there, you're going to see some type of poured-in surface, but we're replacing the playground, putting in a new surface there. And the next Holbrook Park parking lot expansion. So if you're familiar with the Holbrook Park parking lot and where it kind of stops just short of the bathroom building, we'll be extending that parking lot more up towards that outdoor shelter so that we get more parking out there. Maybe entice people not to park in the school parking during school hours. Plus, as downtown grows, parking is going to be at a premium. Pickleball, people like Nick like to, play pickleball a whole lot. So we're trying to take advantage of that space there and create some more parking out there in that area. Rama Church Park, we know what that is. We just purchased that parkland off of Rama Church recently, so we're starting to begin the design phase. So you'll see a couple $100,000 in there for 25, and then in a future year, we would look at, maybe taking that to the next stage. Right now, we have it in 26. We could, depending on what we get back from that, board may push that out to a later year. But all we're talking about in 25 is design. Let's start. Now we have the piece of land. Let's sort of lay that out. What would that look like for parkland? What would that look like for a fire station? So we can plan ahead on how to build a park and when to build a fire station. The next one below that, Lake Norman Charter Elementary Tennis Complex. Same thing there. So out at the fire station off of McElwain, we have some extra land there that's associated with that fire station. I forgot how many acres, MJ, but so I think it may be up to 4 or 5 acres out by the fire station. So we're looking at that, but right beside that fire station, Lake Norman Charter School just purchased land for another elementary school right beside that fire station. So we're partnering with them to look at maybe doing obviously a park out there, but also a tennis complex like we did out at CSD off of Beatty's Ford Road. At their complex, there's a tennis complex out there that we partner with. It just makes sense. So if they're, building tennis, for their school, right now we have a partnership. We use their gyms. They use our tennis courts. And when CSD came into town, we said, hey, let's partner to get some tennis courts. It just makes sense. It's a good bang for the buck for both of us, to partner as best we can. So the same thing here, we'll be looking at how can we partner on tennis courts and create a park and make the best use of the land that we both have. So that's what this is all about. And then Bud Henderson, Beatty's, is that right? Is that the next one? Yes, Bud Henderson, Beatty's Ford Road. What we're looking there is starting the design on a right turn lane. So if you're going up Bud Henderson Road and you did into Beatty's Ford Road, there's no dedicated right turn lane there. So what we'd be looking at is a dedicated right turn lane there. School traffic that backs up like crazy. This would be a great, home run, small project, but we still have to design. You would think it'd be simple, but there's right of way, there's utilities, there's a crosswalk. So every time you think one of these is simple, they're a little more complicated than you think because of all those different issues. But that is a great little project. And then you'll see some of these projects in FY26 that we're looking at. We have moved up like Neck Road and some of those that are great projects that we'll be looking at probably bond dollars for those. I won't get too far into 26, 27. We can go talk about those. We can talk more in detail on all of these projects on the 29th too. So what I would tell you to expect on the 29th, just jumping ahead a little bit, we'll be ready. We can talk more about any of these projects you like, whether they need to slide forward, slide back. We have reasoning for where they are, obviously, on this list and how we fund them, et cetera. But on the 29th, we'll go through this real quick just to make sure everybody's, seems okay with that. We'll talk about the 5-year financial forecast. 5-year financial forecast will have this in it. We'll talk about our personnel, how many people are we proposing to hire in FY25. We'll talk about debt. We'll talk about tax rate. We'll talk about things that may not be in here, like, hey, do we have money in here for sustainability? Do we have money in here for attainable housing? Those kind of things we'll talk about on the 29th too, to kind of get some feedback on it, because those just last two items, we haven't had a ton of discussion on those yet, but I anticipate on the 29th we'll have some more discussion on that and see how we address that. We'll also talk just briefly about, hey, nonprofits, just remember, we're setting those aside. Once the board gets comfortable with the budget, we will set those aside and come back and address how we fund nonprofits. I'm sure I've missed some things. Jackie, anything you would add to that?
I'd like to add that this is not a list of every single piece of capital that we expect to fund in '25. This list is more construction-driven, so the things that could theoretically go over more than 1 year. There's some additional capital that we expect to fund in FY '25 that is more one-year capital type things. An example of that would be police cars, our annual police car purchase, or if one of our departments needs a dump truck or a pickup truck. So some of them smaller pieces of capital that's easier to accomplish in 1 year will also be among that funded capital list in FY '25.
And we will talk about those at the 29th too, so we can tell you, we're getting 1 dump truck and 20 police cars and all those things. So we will go through all of that in greater detail, so you'll see that on the 29th in our, was it 3-hour session?
Minimum 2, yes, sir. So this list tonight,
Jack?
we're looking for direction tonight about if you have questions about this list of larger construction capital type items. I got some comments I'd love to make about the bottom, but let's hesitate for a minute and see if anybody has any questions about this capital.
Question, I know we mentioned something about safety lights by North Meck High School where the children cross the road. What does that fit in at?
So that one, actually, we're getting information back, we think maybe May 20th agenda. Stephen's shaking his head up and down. So we'll have some, look for some feedback from you. But we were basically assuming the board has already told us to move forward with that. So once we get some further feedback, because there may be multiple options, like wooden pole to mast arm poles to those different options and costs, et cetera, to where's the school going to be located. So how much do you want to, is it going to be in this location? Should it be in that location? I don't want to steal too much of Stephen's thunder on the 20th, but the short answer is we will fund that. And once the board gives us direction, we would either fund it out of the current fiscal year or we'll do a budget amendment if needed. So we are moving forward with that until you tell us to stop.
Well, that was one of my questions, so thank you, Commissioner Quarles. I just wanted to check, with the sidewalk category, does that include both projects that would have like a 10-foot multi-use sidewalk, or is that just specifically the?
Yeah, it would include anything and everything. 10-foot, 8-foot, 5-foot, depending on what the need is in those areas. Yes.
I would say this list is intended to be new sidewalks. There is a repair of sidewalks, so anything we need to do existing sidewalks, there's a different line item in the operating budget that's not listed here.
Do you?
I was just going to say, this is more for trying to continue to advance new sidewalks. As Jackie said, the repair sidewalks is an ongoing $500,000 type item in the existing budget.
Do you know off the top of your head, like how many of the sidewalk projects that would be part of that grouping are the multi-use, the wider sidewalks?
Good evening. So the current projects that we have, those are short segment projects that we talked about at the retreat. All of those are of the 5 or 6 foot wide variety at this time. And those are typically your smaller sidewalk projects. $500,000 a year is not going to get you a whole lot. Like, for example, the Huntington Green sidewalk's a little over a mile. That was a $4.5 million project. So these are not the grand, large-scale projects. These are small, short connections, maybe a few hundred feet at a time. Typically, where there is nothing, we see a short connection that's needed. In the past, those have been, the 5, 6 foot wide variety.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and the reason I was asking is because I know at the last Greenway Committee meeting, this was a topic of conversation for a while. So I kind of just want to get more info on that. Thank you.
So, Mayor, what I would say is, I know that was fairly quick, and like I said, I can go through any one of these you want in great detail, but I don't want to bore you, being that you've seen these probably 2 or 3 times or read through them in depth, but we're more than happy to do that, and we're more than happy to do it again on the 29th too. So please ask any questions you have, but hopefully you've seen most of these at least once or twice, and we're here to answer any questions.
When we put together a 5-year financial forecast, the 5-year financial forecast certainly funded everything that's funded in prior years, and it funds everything in 25 through 29. If you see something labeled in future, that's not funded in the 5-year forecast. And so this list will evolve and change, and so some projects will shift from one year to the next, and that will shift for a variety of reasons. Some projects, sometimes we run into a right-of-way problem, or sometimes there is a engineering design issue that causes it to take a little longer, or we might be requesting a grant, so we're putting off funding it a year to see if a grant comes in. There are dozens of different reasons, many of which I'm sure better ones that I haven't thought of off the top of my head, that would cause a project to move or slide. So don't be intimidated that it's not funded in that future year. That's okay. There's some fund balance sources that could be used to fund it as well. If you go to each individual page that we have enumerated on the side, you will see that we're saying that we would consider funding projects that exceed the $50 million in fund and transportation bond funding that the voters gave us this past fall, and I suspect we exceed the $8 million that voters gave us authority to issue in park bonds. There are several different ways that we could accomplish funding more than the $58 million that voters gave us authority to do, some more palatable than others. One way we could is frequently, I don't think I remember a time when we've issued bonds here when we didn't issue bonds at a premium. So what that means is if we issue $50 million in bonds with the difference in interest rates, frequently we can issue bonds at a premium. So we receive $53 million or $54 million in dollars to fund projects. We also earn interest on those bond funds before they get spent. So that might result in us having more than the principal amount of the bonds available to issue. We will get stuck in a rabbit hole, and don't get too intimidated by this. However, there's also the concept of what I'm going to refer to as a two-thirds issue. A two-thirds issue means if you have the appropriate public hearings and if you go through the appropriate administrative steps, for easy math publicly, I'm going to say if we've made principal payments in the previous calendar year of $6 million, there are administrative steps that we can go through, and we can issue, without having to go back to the voters, two-thirds of the amount that we paid off in the previous calendar year. In the example I just said, two-thirds of $6 million would be $4 million. I wouldn't issue $4 million in GO bonds by themselves, but if you happen to be going out to issue 20 or 25 million or half of the 58, and you can roll a two-thirds issue into that, that might be another way where you could get more than 50 or 58 million of bond authority from the voters. You might be able to get more principal out of that issue than just the 58 that was approved. Should you so choose, you have to have a public hearing. You can't do that behind the voters' back, nor should you, but that is a way that you might be able to issue more. One last thing. For, if memory serves, many of the items in future, if you go look at that detail sheet, it probably says a future debt instrument. Two things about that. So historically, Huntersville went to voters in 2003 requesting a referendum. Then we went back in 2012 and requested a referendum. And then we went back in 23 and asked for a referendum. There is no magic. There's no reason behind going back to voters once every 10 years. If you decide you want to go back and ask voters for another referendum this fall, or it's probably late to be doing it this fall, but if you wanted to go in more frequent increments than once a decade, you could do that. So an additional GO referendum could fund that. Transportation projects don't have an awesome debt instrument available to be tied to them, but if we were building a park and we were going to purchase land and put improvements on that land, an installment financing or a LOBS, a limited obligation bond, similar to what we just did on Town Hall, are ideal instruments for things where there is better collateral than a road. So don't be intimidated by the fact that there is the opportunity to issue more debt to do more capital should you so choose.
Yes, sir.
Item 45, the Huntersville Concord Road at Warfield. Vermilion Village is coming out of the ground right now. I understand they'll have started on buildings probably sometime this summer. And yet it doesn't look like we're even going to look at design work till 2027. And I expect there'll be a few
So
cars.
that project is the actual curve in the road, isn't it? Is that one? Yeah, so that's the, you know how that sharp curve in the road is? So that one is, that's what that project is, so we would need to, if we were gonna straighten that out, we would need to probably purchase that house in the corner there. So that one has been put off a little bit to put focus on the other Walter Street slash, where is that one at?
Number 28, Anthony.
It's 28.
So we looked at focus on that. But if that's, think, hey, we need to focus on that project and move that one up, obviously, that's what this discussion's all about. But we would need to probably purchase, I think it's a little yellow house in the curve or something like that, if I remember the color, to make that curve straight out. And it's not going to straighten it out completely, but it's going to, you know, we would look to take out as much of that bend as possible.
Okay, I mean, it might be something we could get ahead of the curve a little bit while they're doing construction and maybe try to move that up a little bit. Just a thought, because as I said, they're going to have, you know, commercial, townhomes, apartments. It's a pretty big project. So instead of waiting till it's done and then, you know, go dig up the road type of thing.
So what I would say is if that's a priority, and then, you know, folks up here think we need to push that one up a little bit, then obviously we will start to make some contacts out there and make that happen. So I'd say just talk amongst the board members and let me know, and we will make that happen.
Patty, would you display the last page of this list? I want to, thank you. So having projects funded in 19 of, call it $20 million and $30 million in 26, I usually refer to this list as a buffet, and I encourage you to pick things off the buffet that you want to fund. It would be unprecedented for us to certainly accomplish, but it'd be unprecedented, frankly, for us to pursue this number of projects. So if there are things that you would suggest us taking off, by all means do. And when I commented earlier about 58 million, you can see there's a sum at the bottom of this list of what we might issue in 24 versus 28 bonds, and we talked verbally a little bit about how we might be able to accomplish more than 58 million, but $238 million worth of projects over the course of multiple years is aggressive.
Oh, I have another question, Jackie. The Holbrook Park expansion that I see at the end, that's separate from the parking lot expansion that was further up the list? Or-
Correct.
So,
This is looking to purchase land, and we just put it out then if future year from now as a placeholder, but if something decides to come available, that has happened before, and just like Rama Church was not even on the list for park expansion, and that, you know, came up, and obviously that was a great opportunity. So if an opportunity arose out there, we would bring that to the board because we at least have it recognized on the list, and then we would look at making a purchase.
and then also at the very top of the list, one of the top ones was the Farrelltown Parkway, and I saw that had, I think, was it almost like 3.9 or it's somewhere.
15.
Oh, 3.9, I was close. I was just curious for the rationale of why that one seems to be very heavy loaded on 25 versus a little bit more spread out.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sure we're in that phase now, right-of-way phase. So.
Yeah, so I think that's shown there, because that would be bond dollars, if I'm, thank you, Patty. So if the bonds are there and available, then all the money would be there at that time. It probably wouldn't all get spent, you know, in one day or 1 month, but the money there would be available at that time, so then to move forward with the rest of the project.
Okay, perfect, sounds good, thanks.
There is a significant cost of issuance bonds. So paying the financial advisor and paying bond counsel and paying Moody's and S&P for their ratings. We try to make it as efficient as possible and not have to incur those fees multiple times. So this contemplates an issue in FY '24 and an issue in FY '28, so that we don't incur those fees. You could absolutely issue bonds every single year if you wanted to, but I would argue that might not be an efficient use of those issuance costs. So once we get those bonds issued, you're more efficiently spending it if you spend it and get it off your books quicker. And we should not issue in '28 if we've not spent a substantial portion of the '24 bonds. Quite frankly, the LGC would frown upon that, and that's part of the reason behind your most recent budget amendment of the FY 2020 bond issue, so we can finish spending those bond proceeds before we issue '24 bonds.
And Jackie, I know the answer, but the question, when do you anticipate coming back to the board on those bonds, on the first issuance?
We have requested that the local government commission put a placeholder on their calendar for us to sell in October, on October 8th, 2024. We're down to ballpark 4 million of the 2020 issue still available, which we expect to go through rather rapidly as we finish the Powell Bill paving, annual street paving list this year. And the other projects on this list and in the financial statements Patty sent out today.
I think that's all I got, Mayor and Board. But as I said, we've got time, today, 29th, with all the questions you have.
The 29th is more broad in tax rate and personnel expenses and operating and other capital and the debt, and therefore we'll be handing you a budget 7 days after that. So the earlier you can get us direction on, hey, take this out, or, oh, absolutely fund all of these, that's helpful in us getting that, 120, over 100-page bound booklet together. So, thank you.
Piece of cake.
We don't have any other questions. We can take a little break until we start our official meeting at 6.
Thank you.